Since 2016, my favourite topic of conversation has been about Brexit. And the main reason for that is because Brexit gives me anxiety. Brexit is a threat, and it was a threat. You know, I saw that it was going to be a threat, that it was a threat to our prosperity and our stability. And so before Brexit happened, I was obsessed with it. And since Brexit has happened, I've been obsessed with it because Brexit is ensuring an enormous amount of uncertainty. And yet here we are continuing on in this true Brit spirit of don't worry, it'll be fine. We'll live with it and all will settle down fine. But in the last couple of weeks, since the Brexit reset has been back in the media, Brexiteers are being forced to talk about Brexit. And it was a delight to hear Arlene Foster, the former leader of the DUP, who ended up in the central part of the Brexit shenanigans because Theresa May defined red lines on Brexit, went to the electorate for a majority and lost that majority, and then ended up having to be propped up by Arlene Foster, who made her life hell. Arlene Foster was asked if she was for Brexit, and she said yes, because she'd been trade minister and she was sure that Brexit was going to make trade easier to get rid of red tape. And the two gentlemen interviewing her, you can see, are on the verge of giggles. How can somebody sit there and say that they voted for something, and we all know that the absolute opposite of what they say they voted for has been delivered?
I was for Brexit, and the reason I was for Brexit was that I believed.
Were you for Brexit?
I was for Brexit, and the reason I was for Brexit was that I believed that we needed to move away from the bureaucracy of the European Union to free up trade and to free up businesses so that small businesses weren't encumbered with a lot of red tape which came from Brussels. So I was in favour of Brexit. Now, it has worked out that we haven't really got the Brexit that a lot of us believed would happen, and there's still red tape flying around and making life difficult for a lot of small businesses. But I think the idea of Brexit was to allow small businesses to flourish, and that's really... I used to be the Trade Minister in Northern Ireland, the Economy Minister in Northern Ireland for 7.5 years. It was one of the most wonderful period of my life because you were being positive about business, you were trying to find relationships with other countries, and I think that was a wonderful time.
How can anyone think that Brexit is worth keeping? Brexit needs to be binned. The sooner the better, the quicker the better. It is hopelessly damaging in all respects, and it is literally destroying our economy, our prosperity, and our reputation in the world. But we keep calm and carry on pretending that we're not living with this lurgy of Brexit, which is beyond a joke. And in many ways, America have gone down the same route with Donald Trump. They're trying to carry on, but at least in 3 years' time, they have the option to vote him out. We don't even have that luxury. We're stuck with this thing because everyone says we voted for it 9 years ago, and for some reason democracy is not allowed to deliver another opinion on this, even though opinion polls show that the majority don't want Brexit anymore. Brexit is for Keir Starmer. He is trying to run the country by obeying Theresa May's red lines, and all it's doing is making him look a fool. He cannot control this thing because it is uncontrollable. Agreeing to govern this country with Brexit drilling a hole in our economy means that you're just managing the chaos of decline. Keir Starmer needs to find the strength to come around and say, actually, Brexit needs to go now. We've got Donald Trump in the White House. You know, the world has changed, blah, blah, blah. Instead of saying the world has changed, so I'm going to deliver more austerity, take away this, take away that, destroy farming. Nobody wants things to be destroyed. People voted for Brexit because they were told things were going to get better, the ones that believed in it. And so the only way, Starmer needs to level with the country and say the only way things are going to get better is if we ditch Brexit. And if Starmer did level with the country and say we need to get rid of Brexit to bring back prosperity and end austerity, it would get rid of this entire madness that the Reform Party are pushing, that somehow they hold the answers to all the problems in the country, despite the fact that it was Nigel Farage who ensured them all by spending decades persuading Britain to vote Brexit. And only levelling with the country about this will sort this out. As to why Starmer decides to keep protecting the Brexit with his red lines makes absolutely no sense when he's betrayed on everything else. All it's doing is weakening his premiership and his position and weakening the country. Getting rid of the Brexit red lines doesn't get rid of Brexit. It isn't a betrayal of the Brexit vote 9 years ago, because it's still Brexit. Brexit was sold on still being in the single market and the customs union. So this whole holding up Brexit behind these red lines is infuriating.
But also it's continuing the Brexit lies, which is only feeding Farage and giving Farage power. It's giving reality to the whole fantasy of the country deciding that Nigel Farage could be Prime Minister. And this is absolute madness. Keir Starmer has only been Prime Minister for 1 year, and he's already in an incredibly weak position because of bad decisions made by his Chancellor, Rachel Reeves, who he should sack, and bad decisions he's made himself.
It's about democracy. That's why I was involved. You can sack the boss. To go into dynamic alignment, as Starmer has just done with on a whole series of policies, means that we don't get to decide what happens to us. That, to me, is wrong. Wrong.
But if we get to decide what happens to us, but we decide it in the way that North Korea does, for instance, we end up being poorer, what's the point? I mean...
Hold on. Are you saying that democracy...
I'm saying democracy is great, but we also want to have prosperity.
Yes, of course we do. But the whole point is, and to me the whole point was, if the country had wanted to vote for Corbyn, it could. And
so better to be free from Brussels and poor than to be slightly less free of Brussels but more prosperous.
Better to be free to make our own decisions, and when our politicians get it wrong, to be able to sack them. Yes.
But you can do that.
You can't, because if whilst a member of the European Union, you do not make the final decision. Foreign court.
Well, it's a collective thing, isn't it? I mean,
yes, but it's not us. It's not democracy.
Well, it's diluted, right? It's diluted.
Sovereignty is the zero-sum game. You've got it or you're not.
But hang on a second. So, there is no such thing as pure sovereignty. We're finding that out with Donald Trump at the moment.
But we can make decisions about how to respond to things. We can't do that as a member of the European Union.
But those decisions have costs, don't they?
Of course, but
we can
all
decide to turn
decisions
our
in
backs
life
on.
have costs.
Well, exactly. So we can decide to turn our backs on Donald. We can turn our back on Donald Trump. And say we don't need a trade deal with the US because they're being far too mercurial about it all, but we're going to be poorer as a result. Are we prepared to do that?
If I walk out my front door, I can turn left or I turn right.
We decided to leave the European Union. That was our decision.
Precisely.
But was it the wise decision?
I believe so, because it gives us those freedoms.
Levelling with the country about Brexit gets rid of the power that has been handed to Nigel Farage and the Reform Party. The only reason they are in the limelight is because they're being allowed to continue this Brexit fantasy that it hasn't been delivered properly. And somebody needs to end this. And the only person that can end this is the person that is Prime Minister. Thank you for watching the video. If you haven't subscribed, please do consider subscribing. And also do comment below. Let me know what you think.